all the time, so it's go. I always felt that service community and community service to others, you know, in my religious background, I felt if you serve other people, it'll come back to serve you.
You know that, I was voted when we went to a youth camp, most likely to succeed, and...
It's kind of weird though, people seeing you in handcuffs, they give you this weird look, and I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, number one, I didn't kill nobody, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I didn't do nothing. I'm a good girl.
Hi, welcome to the channel. Welcome back if you're a current subscriber. Today I'm just doing this premiere with some short clips of known psychopaths and how they take power and control, how they embody that, and how they express that non-verbally. So there are a few clips here, and then I also want to discuss some things about Ken Yuger. I'm also not showing my face, of course, in this. I do have a little bit of swelling in my face from dental issues I've discussed in a community post. For that reason, I'm not showing my face. So let's get started.
The same thing with the victims. I've looked at all of, I don't know if you notice, we got pictures of every one of the victims here. And believe it or not, for the last 12 years, I've studied these photos of the victims. And there is no, we have a shot of all of the victims together here. And when you look over at the photos, I have no recollection of any of them. Never met them.
So here we have an interview from a platform called Peacock from John Wayne Gacy, and this is John Wayne Gacy, of course, looking at the photos of victims. He even refers to them as victims at one point, but his glabella furrow is downwards when he says the word victim. Some aversion to that, perhaps. Now, typically with psychopaths, they do have an aversion to the word victim, and you'll see this with Erin Caffey and other known psychopaths who have ended the lives of several people. They have this aversion to the word victim, and this is more about control typically, because everything they do is about power and control. They love that. That makes them feel so euphoric. And what we see here is very much that aversion to the word victim. But then when he says he never met him, when in reference to these victims, you see the mouth tug a bit. But the mouth tugging is a bit more upward. There's not a raised upper lip. This is not contempt or disgust. There's also a widening of palpable fissures and a bit of pupil dilation. This is excitement as he flips through the photos of the people that he has ended the lives of. So this is just one example of many of a psychopath exhibiting more excitement, not anxiety, though it can come off as anxiety, it can come off as contempt, and it can be difficult to tell. But when it comes to contempt, it wouldn't be more upward with the lip tugging. The upper lip itself would be raised a bit more. It wouldn't be thin the way it is now, which is a containment of emotions and feelings, most likely in a more positive tonality, because there is that widening of palpable fissures around his eyes there, some pupil dilation. This exhibits more excitement than contempt or anxiety.
That's just simply not the case, is it? Are you a victim here?
No.
Did you mastermind this crime? Were you the motivating force behind this happening? If not the motivating force, a motivating force.
I probably added fuel to the fire.
You wanted them dead.
So this clip is Erin Caffey's interview with Dr. Phil, and in it he brings up victimhood, and there is some aversion there, some eye blocking, closing her eyes for an elongated period of time, not typical of a blink, which would be more rapid. So some aversion to the word victimhood, and this is more typical of psychopaths because, again, they love power and control. They don't like the word victimhood. And then, interestingly, she uses the verbiage, added fuel to the fire. Now, in Erin Caffey's case, the house was lit on fire after the victims were, I believe, shot and killed. So it's pretty interesting that she says those words. She doesn't shy away from that. There's no aversion to that particular bit. There's also no lowering of palpable fissures around the eyes, no drooping of features, no negative tonality around this bit of information. That indicates there's no remorse, there's no sadness. This wasn't something she felt she needed to do out of defense. And then Dr. Phil says the words, you wanted your family dead, didn't you? You wanted them dead. And there's a mouth shrug there. Again, pretty interesting. We don't typically see that with someone who had to commit a crime to this extent out of self-defense, out of necessity. This is more typical of someone who did this, of course, and they're excited about it, they're happy about it, they're relieved about it, or they just are indifferent, they have zero remorse.
My evil would just happen to come out because of the circumstances of what I was doing.
Now we're seeing Eileen Wuornos. And yet again, what we're seeing is positive tonality. We're not seeing a drooping of features. We're not seeing vertical lines. We're seeing what appears to be excitement. Typically, when someone has tongue jutting or lip licking behaviors, it's excitement. It's anxiety. What we're seeing here is excitement. There are no indications of anxiety, no self-grooming behaviors that indicate this is someone who just cares about her appearance. And then the verbiage she's using confirms that when she says, my evil. And you see what becomes a smile across her face, some excitement around this before lip licking. She has no remorse, very apparently. But what we typically see with psychopaths in regards to evil, good, and bad is that they will categorize this. They will say their victims are bad, their victims are evil, and they are good. And they'll put that categorization, that label on other people as opposed to themselves. Eileen, however, does not shy away from this. She says, my evil, and then you see the smile appear, this excitement around this, her feeling powerful perhaps around being evil, having control and power over people. And this also comes after she discusses self-defense. There was no self-defense. She doesn't say, I wasn't defending myself, or they weren't defending themselves. There was no self-defense. And you see that positive tonality also on her face. The smile began to creep back up on her face around that point. And again, excitement around that. These people were weak to her in some manner, inferior to her in some manner. There's no remorse, no guilt, no shame. Her chin's not down, covering that vulnerable part of her body, her neck area. She's not exhibiting any signs of remorse around this, of course. Now, Eileen has had a very, very disturbed past, a very disturbed history that would make her the type of person she is, the psychopath she is, because of so much trauma that would be difficult to even go into. There's just so much there, and it has caused her to be the person she is today, where evil isn't a bad thing to her. She doesn't shy away from that, and she admits she is evil, and she's happy about it. She has this power over people that perhaps she did not feel as a child, especially given the kinds of things that were done to her and around her. She didn't feel that power that she is now taken back in a way that's very destructive. And that's typical of psychopaths, but they normally shy away from calling themselves evil, from calling themselves bad. They will put themselves in a position of power non-verbally, but verbally they often say they are a victim of something, a victim of society, of politics, of other people in their lives. But there's some aversion to that at the same time non-verbally, usually when they're discussing victimhood. Now, Eileen here doesn't discuss victimhood at all in this instance, in this clip. She's not discussing her being a victim, perhaps, or her being weak in any way. She's discussing the opposite, her being in power, and this brings her some excitement.
Did some international interviews last night, and one of the questions was like, how do you feel now that you're getting all this attention? But you're a murderer. Oh, so like she just flat out said it was.
Now this is the Gypsy Rose interview with the Vile Files, Nick Vile. I've done a more thorough body language analysis on that on my channel here, but in this particular clip, I wanted to go over how Gypsy actually does not shy away from the word murder. She actually says that outright. When people are feeling guilty, they will have some aversions and distancing language to these kinds of extreme words. But when it comes to psychopaths, they don't feel guilt and shame the way that we do. So they might not shy away from those words. They might not distance themselves from those words, tend to distance themselves more from people, from this attachment to people who may have been their victim, may have been someone that they don't feel fond of. To see this positive tonality, the lifting of the upper lip, but not in contempt. It's not a raise of the upper lip very slightly. It's not a micro expression of contempt there. It's not a tugging of the lip sideways in contempt there. Again, just like John Wayne Gacy, what we see here is a positive tonality around being the murderer, doing this heinous crime that we would typically be more disgusted, more in contempt of, or more remorseful of. Again, we're not seeing the drooping of features, the negative tonality around this. We're not seeing the glabella furrow inward and downward that we see typically when she discusses her mother. When she discusses people she's not fond of, we see the downward glabella furrowing and we don't see the positive tonality that we are seeing here. So that was pretty interesting and more typical of a psychopath.
Through 234 and route I love it. How are you praying? Stuck a pillow in her shirt every time I go out in public, just to give off this illusion.
Now, this particular clip is from a channel called Conspiracy. Most of you already know who Conspiracy is, but this is a live stream Ken Yuger and Gypsy Rose did a very long time ago at an airport. And I just wanted to show this clip because I want to discuss Ken Yuger's potential anger issues, as that's a topic that's coming up lately. My personal belief here, based on what I see, is that Ken doesn't necessarily have anger issues normally, but that he may exhibit anger issues in more recent events given how Gypsy is. Now, it's known that Gypsy can be very vindictive.
Just remember, just as much dirt as you have on me, I have on you, honey. You punch at me, I punch back 10 times harder.
And people who are vindictive will punish you for a lot of things. For Gypsy, most likely finding his ex-girlfriend's hairbrush, something he might have said, something that made her look bad, something that she wanted him to do, because there are clips of him leaving her on the bed, leaving her in places, and she may feel some sort of bruise to the narcissistic ego or just some shame and embarrassment around that she now feels she has to punish him for. And she's not going to do that live online fully. So what we see instead is more Ken's side of things. This is just, again, my personal belief, because he doesn't exhibit that anger around other people. Something that narcissists and sociopaths will do is pick at their target, pick at the people they want to punish. They will say things that are seemingly harmless to other people that wouldn't make sense for someone to be angry about, and cause the target of their punishment to look as if they're constantly angry, that they have issues, that they're not mentally stable. And there is some controversy there, some conversation about how Ken isn't mentally stable because he's with Gypsy, and we know what kind of person Gypsy is. And Gypsy didn't look like an adult when she was arrested, and he wrote to her around that time. So that's very possible that he's not mentally stable for that reason. He's not mentally healthy for that reason. There are some issues there, most likely dating back to his childhood trauma that he most likely has. But I don't want to go into that right now. I just want to discuss how his seeming anger issues aren't around just anything and everything for no reason, most likely. That this is all part of Gypsy's plan to make him seem like an angry, abusive person, as she's tried to make literally everyone else in her life seem angry and abusive. This is evidence for her to say, see how angry he always was. And now people are bringing up, namely other creators, and I'm not saying this to slander them or say that they're saying anything negative about them in any way, but that now it's this controversy among other YouTube creators and TikTok creators that Ken may have some anger issues. And I'm not saying that he doesn't, but that those seeming anger issues didn't come out of nowhere and are more likely because he's being poked and prodded verbally and non-verbally offline behind the scenes by someone who is historically very vindictive, who always feels the need to punish and embarrass other people, such as Ryan. Look at what she did with her recent video that was supposed to be an apology to Ryan, but was so apparently manipulative that it didn't take a lot to see what she was doing there. The amount of gaslighting and manipulating that she was doing there, that she was embarrassing Ryan, that she had embarrassed Ryan historically, and that she is not the victim of anything. And that's typical of abuse. That's typical of people who are narcissistic or sociopathic, and those kinds of people will poke and prod verbally and non-verbally to cause someone else to look crazy, to make sure that there's a smear campaign around someone that did something to them that they feel was betrayal, abandonment, and hurt them in some way. I very much believe that that's what we're seeing here, and not just someone who's a loose cannon, someone who flies off the handle for no reason, someone who gets angry at the gas station pump and is impatient for those reasons. He also most likely has anxiety, which sociopaths and psychopaths don't typically experience anxiety the way that we do. People who are narcissistic are also frequently more confident in their abilities to do things and can be less anxious for that reason. I'm not saying narcissists don't experience anxiety. but that Ken exhibits anxiety to a level that I would not expect of someone who's a sociopath or a narcissist, and that the anger issues that we are seeing aren't anger issues because he's mentally unstable for no apparent reason, but that Gypsy is manipulative. In fact, the very day that she says she's 3 centimeters dilated and he has to rush to the hospital, it's interesting to me, with how manipulative she is especially, that this came around Mia's graduation, that the appointment was that very day of Mia's graduation, that she did not move that appointment, and that she also did not allow Ken to be there at that specific appointment. Allegedly because it would be a very intrusive appointment, a very invasive appointment. But labor itself is. Everything around conceiving and giving birth to a baby is invasive. So it does not make sense for him to not be at that specific appointment for that reason. On that day for that reason. My own personal belief is there's something she was manipulating there, and perhaps Ken knew that. And perhaps that's why he was so frustrated. Aside from that, it could just be anxiety because he was in a rush. Things weren't working out. The gas pump was giving him problems. And he has a level of anxiety that other people who don't go through daily trauma from a manipulative, vindictive, sociopathic person don't experience. Where they feel that if they're not on time, if they don't do what needs to be done, they're going to have a lot more conflict and pain and suffering than people who aren't in a relationship like that. Especially if he's having to contain a lot of emotions because Gypsy is the way she is. Because Gypsy does not allow for him to express those emotions, that anger, fear, anxiety, or anything that's not positive towards her, most likely. And historically, we see this with the way that she's treated Ryan, that everything has to be very fabricated, very calculated, very routine, scheduled, and look good online for her specifically. It all has to look a specific way for her. And if anyone falls out of line, it's a betrayal, an abandonment. They fail her loyalty test. And to have to constantly repress those emotions in front of the camera or around Gypsy because things have to go her way can cause these anger issues, can cause what looks like anger issues. So while he may look like an explosive person, someone who has these issues seemingly out of nowhere, that looks mentally unstable, it all is for a reason. Gypsy could make Ken look great if she wanted to. But we see even in some interviews where she says,
he gets the best burp.
Verbally, what she's doing is putting him superior to her. But non-verbally, when she says those words, there's an aversion to that. She seems annoyed and frustrated and not happy that he's such a great father. So even there, she cannot allow him to be someone superior to her. What we see from Ken, however, is the opposite. Verbally, he's always putting her superior to him, to others. He doesn't put her down constantly the way that she constantly puts others down. The way that she's constantly verbally expressing everyone's inferior to her. He does not do that. He said that she's sweet. He has made her look good online despite her not doing the same. Despite that not being reciprocated. She does not make him look good online.
People I trust in this world.
Several people wanted me to go over this part where Gypsy makes what appears to be a threatening move, a slashing move perhaps, a move as if she's cutting someone's neck. Normally, when someone is being aggressive, when they're being threatening, or when they're even subtly trying to threaten someone, we will see a flash of contempt. Or downward glabella furrowing, grief muscles there, downward that indicate some anger, some issue they have with whoever they're speaking about or to. And instead what we see is her glancing downward towards her fingers and her making this motion that's very subtle, that's not aggressive, that's not forceful. And while it appears to be towards her neck, it isn't on her neck, which is more typical of someone who is trying to make a threatening move. And while it appears that she is perhaps undecided and about to make this threatening move, again, we don't see this flash of contempt. We do see lip compressions after she makes this subtle movement here, and that's the holding back of something. What I believe we're seeing here is that she was going to show a span between her fingers of just how many people she trusts. In this case, very few people. She would show a very tiny gap between her two hands that indicate that she trusts very few people. But there's uncertainty there. She looks downwards towards her fingers and then decides against this, and then the lip compressions is holding back, saying that there are this many, and that's not a lot. But she decides against this and goes into whatever she's going to say next. So there's no aggression or anger towards this, no indication that she's being threatening here or deciding to be threatening here. And what would be more typical of Gypsy, what I've seen when she is being threatening, is more aggression. Her baring her teeth and the flaring of her nostrils, something that indicates anger as she is feeling more threatening. Instead, she's looking downwards. Her chin is even downwards. Now, that could just be the angle of the camera, because it is a little bit beneath her in this particular video that's supposed to be an apology to Ryan, her now ex-husband. But this would come with more confidence, more directly looking at the camera and making this threatening movement. While it can be her deciding that she's about to make this threatening movement and then deciding against it, we also wouldn't typically see both fingers out and open, her thumbs up showing, and we would see more aggression with this, more anger, more indications that she is feeling that he's the target of her anger, of her rage, of someone she wants to threaten. So I don't believe that that's what we're seeing here, though I could absolutely see why some of you have noted that that appears to be what that is. She is absolutely someone who is capable of being aggressive, of being threatening, of ending the life of someone else. I'm going to say allegedly, but we know her case, we know her crime and the things that she's capable of. And I don't believe that's what we're seeing here. In other areas, when she's discussing Dee Dee and Nick in particular, she does display someone who's predatory, who's threatening, who's angry, someone who would be capable of doing such a thing. But that's just not what we're seeing in this moment. What we're seeing is her have two fingers up, and both aren't towards her throat, just the one because she's turning away, because there's some uncertainty there as she's undecided whether she's going to commit to showing the span of how many people she trusts. And so that's what we were seeing here. I'm going to end this here. Let me know your thoughts, of course, and please hit the like button. Please make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching.